Hey everybody, it's Ahmed Azahid here. We're going to get started in 1 minute, okay? Share the feed, bring your friends along. We're going to get started in 1 second here with NGP Talks. Well, hey everybody, it's Ahmed Azahid. Welcome here once again to NGP Talks here on my page and on the page of NGP. Now, NGP once again is New Generation for Palestine. We are a network of Palestinians. We are out here to promote each other, to celebrate each other, and to make sure each other's voices are out there and being heard. So today, we have a special guest. The last 5 weeks or 6 weeks, we've done this. We've been doing it for a few months. We're now in our 6th episode now. We've had guests from elected officials to artists. And tonight, our guest is somebody who I've been lucky enough, again, to know literally my whole life and who has been doing great things out there into the world. So let me bring her on. Our guest today is the esteemed, the awarded, the world-renowned Susan Muaddi Darraj. Hi, Susan.
Hi, كيفك عامر?
Good, very good, very good. I might call you Susan a few times because that's what I'm used to my whole life here. But so again, Susan is joining us from Baltimore. She is a author many times over. And before we start, Susan, let me ask, tell everybody where you are from in Palestine, where you're from in Palestine.
From Taibe Ramallah.
Yeah, which is a little village, just like a little north of Ramallah.
Right.
Yeah, I've been there many times, and a lot of their population in the 70s and 80s ended up in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
Yeah, somehow they all ended up in Philadelphia. I think in my family, it was my uncle who came first, and there's always somebody who pulls everybody else. He came first and stayed in Philadelphia and started bringing the family, and then there's a lot of us now in that area in Philadelphia.
Yeah, and then my family ended up there in the 1980, and then I don't know. I don't know how all these Arab, without Facebook, and I don't know how they met each other. But they met each other somehow.
There's some kind of secret network that existed before Facebook that we invented. I don't know, homing pigeons or something. I don't know what it was.
Yeah, I think FBI calls it terrorism. But yeah, there's some sort of secret network
somewhere on this, right?
So when we were growing up, we were in youth groups together. We were in a group called NGP together. We were in Depke troops together, and you always. You're one of those. You're not one of those stories. There's all these stories of people who said, I'm going to be a doctor or a lawyer. They ended up being something else. But you always said you were going to be a writer, and you became a writer. And what was that drive from such a young age?
I'm very stubborn. You know that about me. I don't know. I think I'm one of those kids who just loved reading books my whole life. I'm surrounded by books everywhere. Everywhere I've lived, I have lots of books around me. And I'm just very inspired by books and storytelling. In my family, my father is a great storyteller. So I grew up hearing stories growing up. He would just make up stories all the time, and we would add on to them together. It was like a game. So storytelling is just something that has been part of my life, and I was very focused on it. Also, I was terrible at math. Maybe that was part of it too. I'm still terrible at math. Um, my daughter in 5th grade was taking this honors math class, and I told her at that point, this is the maximum. You've reached my maximum level. I cannot help you beyond this point, with math. Um, so I think I just was always one of those kids who was that was my strong point, was literature and writing. And I was always making up stories in my head, so I put them down on paper. And after college, I started having some success with getting them published. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and it's not, look, I mean, it's not something, and I do remember your family is very artistic, and your dad and his brothers especially were always the singers and musicians at every get together. So, but I mean, having an Arab kid who wants to get into art, that's not always like supported by their family. So, I mean, you were kind of pretty lucky in that respect, that your parents were really open to that and supporting you in that.
They were. I mean, I remember when I was maybe in 3rd or 4th grade, we were still living in South Philly at this time. And my teacher really liked my stories, and she was telling me I should copy them out by hand and make like nice little books with them. We didn't have computers, right? So I would copy them out and illustrate them and staple them together and make these little books. And, my parents actually treated me to this incredible gift. They bought me a typewriter, which was like,
Whoa.
in the 1980s, to have your own typewriter was a huge deal. And
Yeah.
so I started typing up my stories, and they looked to me like published books.
That's right.
And I mean, I thought that was really neat that they did that. So yeah, I've always felt supported by them. They've always encouraged my career. They like hearing about what I'm working on, what I'm writing about. So it shouldn't surprise us as Arabs. Like we're not all. I know there's like this joke that we're all being pushed to be doctors and engineers, and maybe there's some truth to that, but we have a great storytelling culture. So it shouldn't surprise us that, the children of Arab immigrants are being encouraged to do that, to go into those fields.
Yeah. Now, as you've written, and we'll get into the books like Inheritances from Exile and A Curious Land and all that kind of stuff, where Palestine and the story of Palestine has been the central theme of your work, even all the way up to Farah Rocks, the children's series, which we'll get to. But was that a theme of your stuff when you were writing when you were a kid?
No. When I was a kid, I was writing like my own plagiarized versions of the Babysitter Club, just with Arab kids in them. And, the Never Ending Story, but like with an Arab protagonist, stuff like that. So I was doing a lot of that. I think when I was older, when I got older, like when I was in college, I studied writing by like African American writers, by Latinx writers. And I started to realize that I could actually write stories that were authentically Arab. They didn't have to just be stories that were that had like a token Arab in them. You know what I mean? Like I could write stories that were from our community. And so I kind of learned by reading Alice Walker, Toni Morrison, Toni K. Bambara, Julia Alvarez, all these wonderful writers, how I could actually do that, how I could actually write about my community for a readership that maybe wasn't familiar with our community at all, or maybe even had some pre-existing stereotypes about our community. So that helped me a lot to see that the stories could be more authentically Palestinian.
Yeah, I mean, you just brought up something which has always been a recurring theme whenever I talk to Palestinian artists, and it was a theme for me too, and not just artists, activists too. But there's a common thing where young Palestinian Americans, even if it was in the 80s when we were sort of like being formed and growing up and gaining our political consciousness, it just seems to be more often than not that it was Black writers and Black artists that we were sort of magnetized to. Like there was something about that experience that we seem to relate to our own experiences. Would that was the case for you too?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, James Baldwin, when I read James Baldwin, it changed my life. It changed my perspective on everything. And in terms of like connecting to the experiences of Black Americans, I started to understand that our community owes a lot to African Americans and Native Americans, because I mean, we would be nowhere if they hadn't really paved the way in terms of civil rights, and really fought for the things that, by the time our communities arrived in the 60s and the 70s, there was already legislation that protected us, as marginalized people of color. So we owe a lot to that. And our experience is obviously nothing like their experiences. But I think that, like, reading Baldwin, reading Toni Morrison, and these incredible writers helped me to understand that, like, there's a power structure in place that is marginalizing us. It's pushing our stories to the side. Sometimes it brings in our stories to like decorate something, or they use us to maybe, tokenize or make themselves look like they're more woke, or they're more, inclusive than they really are. So I think I just learned how to, um, and I'm still learning this. It's not like I've reached, my peak yet with this,
Right.
but like with Baldwin, I learned, I think, how to not allow someone to take over my story, whatever my story was, how
Right.
to be smart about it. So yeah, I think we owe a lot. We owe a lot to Black writers and other marginalized groups that that their communities are older than our community, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, no two experiences of communities are the same, but that doesn't mean we're not victims of the same thing, that's out there in the world. White
I
people.
remember, when we were, I mean, you remember when we would organize, like when our parents and stuff would organize demonstrations in Philly. Who always came out to our demonstrations? Black
Yeah,
Americans, always there with us, always.
and
So
we were organizing. My parents were organizing, and I know other Palestinian parents in Philly were organizing with the anti-apartheid activists and going to their stuff too when we were kids. So I mean, it's normal for me. When I was a kid, when people ask me what are my comedic influences, it's always like Dave Chappelle, Eddie Murphy, Richard Pryor, those kinds of experiences. I've stopped saying Bill Cosby and other but those kinds of experiences were what just I connected with, and they were the things that I got into. All right, so I actually want to start from okay, so you went to college, you got writing degrees, you started teaching pretty much right away after you got out of school. But I want to now start at the most recent stuff because it's the most exciting stuff. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, which is this new children's book series, which now you're up to I think the third one, called Farah Rocks. Tell us about Farah Rocks.
I love the span. Hold on, I'm gonna do the span for you. Ready? Here we go.
Okay. Oh, wow, wow. This is like an Instagram picture. Okay.
Yeah, isn't she cute? She's the cutest character. Yeah, Farah is my character, and I've told this story before, but I don't know if people here may not have heard it. I wrote this book from my daughter because she's a big reader like me. All my kids are readers, thank goodness, and she loves to read a lot of different things. And she was reading some of my favorite books when I was her age. It's about a few years ago, maybe 4 years ago. And she actually just made this casual comment to me. She goes, I wish that there were some books that had Arab girls in them, right? And so I got her a copy of Habibi by Naomi Shihab Nye, which I read when I was in college. That book was published in like 93. I think it's the first young adult novel, middle grade novel, actually, with a Palestinian American character in it. It's a standalone novel. And you know what? It's the only one I could find that had an Arab character in it for her age group. And I was like, this is really terrible, because here she is asking me a question that I asked when I was her age. And I thought that was that's too long for things to not have changed, right? So 30 years. So I basically said to her, I'm going to write you a story. So I created this character named Farah, which means joy, because she's a really joyful character. She's funny, and she's the kind of kid that I wasn't, which is I think she has no problem blending her Arab and her American
Right.
sides. She kind of moves seamlessly between the two worlds. Um, and she's a cool kid. Like, she's smart, and her last name is Hajar, so we call her Farah Rocks, and she's a rock collector. And she just has a little brother and her parents and her, there's a lot of funny things that happen in the books. There's some serious themes, but a lot of it is very fun and light and joyful. And it's for middle grade kids. It's like for 4th grade to 6th grade kids, which is the age my daughter was back then. So yeah, so we sold a 4-book series to a publisher, and now we're on book 3. Book 4 comes out in the summer.
That's awesome. So I mean, your daughter says to you, Mom, I wish there was books with kids books with an Arab kid in it, and you're like, well, lucky for you, I'm a writer. Yeah.
I do. If she wishes for like chocolate chip cookies, I can do that too. But if she wants a book, I can handle that, right? It was hard. It was hard to get though. Can I just say something about that? And I think people probably suspect this. It was very hard selling a book with a Palestinian American character in it. It's the first book series with a Palestinian character in it. And it was a hard sell because I think the publishing world they want books about Arab girls and women, but they want those girls to have they want them to be fighting their own families and culture, as opposed to like living normal lives, the way that most of us do live normal lives. Right. So that was a hard sell.
Right. She needs to be like some sort of damsel in distress that is fighting against her culture, and her culture won't let her be who she is. And there definitely needs to be like a white character who saves her. And, that seems to be the depiction of every Arab woman in every piece of every sort of, mass or entertainment media that goes out.
I mean, if you want to become a New York Times bestselling author, just use your Arab name to write a book with an Arab woman in it who somehow fights against her oppressive patriarchal culture, and you'll be on the New York Times bestseller.
Yeah, you'll be very famous very quickly. Yeah,
you will. Mm-hmm.
There's a book exactly like that, which will go nameless in this. But that happens all the time, unfortunately. I mean, you can only be to a certain point who they want you to be, and trust me, that exists in writing, it exists in comedy, exists in everything. We have a commenter here. Janet from looks like, I don't know where she's from, but she says she's a 5th grade teacher. She uses Farah Rocks for many teaching points. It is her mentor text that she uses throughout the year, and it looks like she's in New York. Her dad is from Palestine, mom from Jordan. And so look, I mean, you are making it in the classrooms, man.
That makes me so happy, Janet. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Is that sort of fall in with a lot of the responses you've been getting from our community and from other communities? What has been the response now that you're on the 3rd book already?
Well, let me just say, do you know how many Arab Americans are actually elementary and middle school teachers? It makes me so proud to know that. I've been getting contacted a lot by elementary school teachers, middle schools. I've been doing, even in the virtual pandemic era, I've been doing lots of school visits virtually. I just did a school visit the other day to the Charter Academy out in outside of Detroit, I think. That was really nice because a lot of those kids spoke Arabic, and that was really fun. They already were familiar with a lot of the themes I was talking about. And even, schools that don't have Arab teachers have recognized that, like, I've had a lot of teachers reach out to me and say, a lot of my students are Arab American, and I would love to use your book in our class. Would you come and talk to our class, to our school? So that's been really nice to know that even teachers who are not Arab American are really thinking of making their students feel seen and heard by reaching out to me or by using Farah in their classroom. Thank God for teachers. They're really heroes.
Yeah, no, it is. I keep telling people, teachers were my best and worst experiences growing up as an Arab American. The teachers that supported me, I remember them, and the teachers that brushed me off, I remember them too. So they are like
Yeah.
burned into my memory, my relationships with my elementary school and high school teachers. Okay, now let's go to the obvious that always happens whenever a Palestinian does anything. Have you gotten any sort of backlash from people who don't like Palestinians very much? I mean, you know, you got a book, you got a book about a little Palestinian American kid, which has a connotation that she might be throwing rocks. So I mean, like, you know, so I mean, what kind of? I don't need to ask you if. I can just ask you what. So what kind of hate mail have you received, Sosa?
Honestly, you know, not much. I mean, the kid lit world is a different world. I think I received a lot of hate mail when I did the second book of short stories, A Curious Land, that was set in Palestine.
Yeah.
And people didn't really like the, as they call it, the humanization of the Palestinian people, as if we need someone to make us humanized. But I hate when people say that. But yeah, people didn't really like that, and they thought I would, you know, you always get accused of being anti-Semitic, and it's like it's an old attack. Like, I mean, right. Yeah, some of my activist work, like the Tweet Your Phobe campaign that I organized around Rashida Tlaib, I got a lot of hate mail, a lot. I had to shut down my my social media for a little bit. Took all my kids' pictures off social media. I was really nervous for a while, but that leveled off. But
all right, well let's talk about that, because that's on my list. And since you brought it up, let's talk about that, because a lot of people still don't even know that you did it. So any Palestinian American who has a pulse knows that in 2019, when Rashida Tlaib, the first Palestinian American congresswoman, was getting ready to be inaugurated, there was a very quickly organized viral campaign called Tweet Your Phobe, where Palestinian women around the world, because Rashida had announced that she was going to attend the inauguration in a Palestinian dress, and so Palestinian women around the world started tweeting themselves on all kinds of social media, Instagram, Twitter, and what's not, in a thobe. And, you know, like Arabs do, I think like 75 people took credit for that campaign. But the truth is, you put together that campaign. How did that happen? How did that come about? And, you know, how were you sort of taken aback by the reaction that it got?
Yeah, I put it together. It took me about 2.5 weeks to put it together. So Rashida tweeted in mid-December that picture of her thobe on Instagram, the thobe that her mother made for her. She tweeted it, or she put it on Instagram, I mean, and said, "This is what I'm wearing to my inauguration," right? And I was like, when I saw that, I was so excited. I couldn't believe that she was actually doing that. And then the very next day, there was an article in Breitbart News, which you can imagine made me feel sick to my stomach. So the article said that Congresswoman elect Tlaib is going to be wearing Muslim garb, and they started discussing what she was doing in this way that I could see them rewriting the narrative already. I could see it coming down the pike. So this was mid-December. So I said to myself, I don't know, there was something, Amr, like I thought of like the Congresswoman's mother and this beautiful thing that she did for her daughter, and like Breitbart News just wrecking that moment. And I was like, not today, right? We're not doing this. So I said, maybe we can do some kind of a campaign to support her, and also to educate people about what is a thobe, like what does it even mean? What is it for? Why is she wearing it? What is the significance of it? And also, what is the significance of a mother making this dress for her daughter, right? It's a really special thing. So I started a private, I tweeted out the idea first, and I got a lot of backlash and hate mail from that. This was still in mid-December. So I started a private Facebook group and just invited I invited like maybe 40 or 50 people to it. I invited you, and I invited some other people to it. And I started setting up guidelines for what we were going to do. I said, the day that she's inaugurated, that morning at 10 a.m., we're all going to just start posting our pictures. So get your thobes out, get them ready, get them ironed, snap some pictures, do your glamour shots with your thobes, get ready. But by the time January 2nd, I believe, rolled around, we had something like 5,000 people in that group.
Yeah.
So when it launched really big, and it got some attention, and it went viral by the end of the day, the New York Times was calling me and CNN was calling me. And it was really, God, it was just so amazing to see all those pictures. It was incredible. Like, these reporters were calling me, and I remember one guy saying, your culture is just so beautiful, and I'm like, Bakir ya ammi, of course. We've been telling you that for how long? But yeah, thank you for noticing and for doing finally like some positive articles. So I think the articles that came out about the thobe, especially like the New York Times piece, and a lot of women's magazines did pieces on it too, it drowned out any kind of negative publicity because she still got some negative publicity for that dress. But I think we were able to drown it out pretty well.
No, that level of support was really amazing. And yeah, I mean, I'm always amazed. I guess I'm not, because I went to, we both went to school in America, so we shouldn't be surprised. But I'm still always amazed at how little, American culture knows about just the existence of other cultures. Like we're out there, and we've been, it's been a pretty long time, I mean, you go to your village or you go to my city in Palestine, and people are still telling stories from 1,000 years ago. Yeah. And, here, I always tell this joke where, in America, somebody says, look at this building, it's 100 years old. And they think, it's a big deal. And, you're in Palestine and you're in Jerusalem and you're eating a falafel sandwich, and you say to the owner of the restaurant, tell me about this restaurant. And he says, well, Jesus ate there. And you're like, all right, well, this old. I mean, I remember when I went, I keep telling this joke about when I went to your village in Palestine, and a guy thanked me I went to go do a show there, and a guy thanked me for doing a show there. And he said, thanks for coming to Taibe. And I said, no, Taibe is a beautiful place. And he said, do you know why we call our village Taibe? I said, no, why? And Taibe means like nice or good, in Arabic, among other things. And he said, well, a long time ago, Salah ad-Din came here, and he said, these people are very tayyibin, like they're good people. And so, that was 1,000 years ago.
That's Salah ad-Din, boy. He named a lot of villages.
Oh, he made an imprint.
He did.
He made an imprint in Palestine.
He did, yeah. Everybody wants to go be connected back to Salah ad-Din. I think that was my cousin maybe who said that to you.
Well, something else I learned when I went to Taibe is that, because I've known, you and your dad and your uncles and your aunts, who I think your dad is like what, one of 7 or 8 or 9 or something like that.
Yeah. 8.
Yeah. And, I grew up with all of them. I mean, literally grew up with all of them. And, they all looked, they just, let me put it like this. They really looked like brothers and sisters. Like, they really looked alike.
Yeah.
Okay. And then when I went to your village, I was like, wow, all these people look like all the people that I know. And then I realized that, they've just been marrying each other for like 700 years. No. So everyone just looks like each other. I mean, there's a little
eyebrows. We just have good eyebrows. That's why they're very distinctive. That's why you recognize us. That's what it is.
Sultan, I saw 2 guys that looked like exactly like your dad, and I said to them, "Are you guys brothers?" And no, at first I said, "Are you guys twins?" And they're like, "No." I'm like, "Oh, okay, so you're brothers?" No. We are like 5th cousins. I think his dad's cousin is my mom's cousin, but they look exactly like each other. But I don't think it's the only village. I think a lot of villages in Palestine, they just have their look because there's, they've been marrying each other for a long time.
No.
Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong. Okay, we won't get into any of that. So, But
It's gonna be your next stand-up bit, right?
yeah, I mean, look, I mean, oof, man. Okay. Anyway, but I mean, our villages and our places literally go back to the Bible. I mean, I think type is in the Bible. Nazareth is obvious. I mean, we're talking about, real histories and trying. Do you ever sort of feel when you're writing Inheritance of Exiles, which is a collection of stories, and then A Curious Land, a collection of stories, and even with Farah Rocks, I know we all try to just like in art, we just try to like be ourselves and we just try to, but do you ever feel the weight, of like 3,000 years of 4,000 years, 5,000 years of history? And you're like, man, I'm a little bit responsible for this. I don't want to mess up. I don't want to say something that, takes our people back 500 years. I mean, do you feel some of that responsibility sometimes?
I do.
Yeah.
Especially in my first two books, and I'm writing a new book of short stories now. Because I'm writing, like, I'm not writing for an Arab audience, right? I write in English for a largely American European audience. And so there are really deep stereotypes that exist about our people in these communities. And I'm not writing to educate anybody. I'm trying to write my own stories, but there's a burden there, right? So for example, if I write a male character who is, let's say, hitting his wife in the story, right? Let's say there's a story with domestic abuse in it. This guy's hitting his wife. Right. I worry about that. Like I worry about that. I worry, am I feeding into some kind of
right
stereotype that exists about Arab men, like as if Arab men invented patriarchy, right? As if like Arab men are the only men in the world who are, who can be misogynistic. Like this is the history of the world. But I feel the weight of that, and I find ways to mitigate that. I feel like as a fiction writer, if I'm just honest about my characters, if I'm honest about situations, for example, I write short stories that are linked together. So I may have a story with one man who is a very negative character, but I'll have like three other stories where I have male characters in them that are much more, three-dimensional characters, or they have other traits I can bring to the surface. So I try to walk that fine line between telling an authentic story, but also being aware that I could be, as James Baldwin taught us, like I could be used to justify some kind of stereotype that exists. And I don't ever want to do that. So it's difficult. I mean, I have a hard time with it. I really edit my stuff very carefully. I go over it and over it. I have a couple of good Arab American friends who are also fiction writers, and we read each other's work. We're like our own sensitivity readers in a sense, and we help each other walk through that field of landmines.
I think of like my comedy too. It happened with me, and I back to this notion of like talking about stereotypes. Like men, like Arab men, are we sexist? Sure. Of course, obviously. Are we like especially sexist? I don't know. I don't think so. I mean, not that I'm not trying to like excuse us or anything, but I mean, we're not like, we're men. We live in a world of patriarchy, but it just seems to be this notion that like Arab men or Muslim men are like, especially patriarchal, and we have to deal with that, or that, Arab women are especially oppressed. It's funny. I grew up, I don't know, and I feel like we both grew up in a world where like, when we went to visit each other's houses, we're like the men in one room and the women in another room. Sure. And sometimes the men go and play cards and the women did the cooking. Sure. But like, I don't know. I mean, I know my mom, she was kind of in charge. I kind of think your mom was too. I mean, like it was not, we didn't grow up in a world where like the women were hidden from view and like there was no role. I mean, even in the organizing and political work we did growing up, our moms were at the forefront of that kind of work, being out there and being the voices of what we were doing, and then dealing with all this other stuff. I remember I told a joke in the beginning of my comedy, which I stopped telling. I would say, I tell people I'm Arab, and they say, "Oh, you don't look Arab." And and I just would say thank you or something. I'd be confused, I wouldn't know what to say. And when I would tell that joke in front of Arab audiences, they would laugh, and I would understand why they were laughing, because it happened to them before. And the point of the joke is that, like, that's a ridiculous racist question, but and Arabs would laugh. But then I would tell that joke in front of white people, and they would laugh too, like they'd laugh really hard. And I would be like, wait a second, I don't understand why you're laughing. I think you're laughing because you're like, right, yeah, he doesn't look Arab. How hilarious is that? Yeah. And I'm perpetuating the stereotype so I stopped telling that joke because I couldn't tell it in another way. So it was like too harmful, and I just stopped telling it because I was really worried. Like, I don't want them laughing because I'm up here sort of perpetuating whatever stereotypes they think about. Okay, let me ask you the opposite, not the opposite question, different. Do you then feel also sometimes the weight of Palestine in the other way? Like, you feel like you have to tell that story, you have to express the struggle, and do you sometimes feel like that's pushing you in a certain direction too?
Well, let me just go back and I want to say a couple of things about what you were just talking about. One is related to like women and the status of women in our communities and other communities. I think one of the issues is that in America, it's such a capitalist society that, like, a woman who stays at home to take care of her home and children is viewed as like not working. But any woman who's home with children knows that she's working very hard. And I think in the Arab world, the work of the home and the raising of the children and the caring of the home is seen as a really vital type of work. So, to look at an Arab woman who's decided to stay home and like, my mother was working until I was born in the 70s, and then she stayed home with me and my brothers. Right. I never viewed my mom ever as a woman who was not empowered in any way. Your mother was running a restaurant at one point. You know what I mean? I feel like, and as you said, they were organizing a lot of our social justice work. They were doing all of that work. So it's hard for me to say, like, for people to say, oh, well, Arab women are oppressed and their men don't let them work. And how are you defining work? I mean, there are also tons of Arab women who are actually out there working in other fields, as well as raising families, right? So anyway, I just have a problem with the way that people conceptualize the meaning of work. I think in the world, the work of the home is seen as really vital and important work, and it's really very highly respected. The other thing that I think is the other charge that's leveled against Arab men and Arab communities is that we're like especially homophobic. Like our community is homophobic. Every community is homophobic. I had a person tell me one time this is like a few years ago, when they knew that I was Arab American, oh yeah, your people are like really homophobic. And I was like, excuse me, there was just a baker who took a case to the Supreme Court because he didn't want to bake a cake for a gay couple. Right. We're homophobic? Like, are you kidding me? They don't see it in their own communities. Every community in the world is homophobic, and that stuff has to stop. But you can't just leave that at our door. Like, everybody has to work toward, rectifying that. Okay, so back to your next question. I wanted to make those 2 points.
Yeah.
I
know my mom's not homophobic because I'm 43 and single, and she thinks I'm gay, and she's totally accepted it. Like, she's totally accepted it. And now she's not mad that I'm gay. She's mad that I'm gay and not telling her. So she's mad I'm keeping like a secret from her. So like, she's totally accepted it. My mom has gone through the 5 stages of grief. Like the 5 stages of grief, like anger, depression, acceptance, bargaining, whatever. She's reached acceptance. She's gotten to acceptance without the initial trauma. Like nothing happened. But so, she's like totally accepted it. Yeah. I mean, look, but before you go on to that next thing, I tell this joke now on stage where I say, being there's homophobia obviously in the Arab culture, but it manifests itself in a weird way. So I was in Jerusalem walking down the street. I'm American, so I have American customs. And I'm in Jerusalem walking down the street, and so one thing that's different from America and back home is that in America, if a man and a woman are walking down the street holding hands, it's totally normal. And if two men are walking down the street holding hands, it's kind of weird. Back home, if a man and a woman are walking down the street holding hands, it's kind of weird. And if two men are walking down the street holding hands, it's totally normal. Okay, so, I didn't know that. So I'm walking down the street with a friend of mine in Jerusalem, and he wants to talk to me, so he grabbed my hand. All right, but I'm American, so I was like, hey, man, stop it. And he was like, no, it's okay. I was like, no, it's not okay. Don't touch me. He said, no, come on, you can hold my hand. I was like, I don't want to hold your hand. Okay. And then he looked at me and he said to me the most Arab thing I've ever heard in my life. He said, come on, hold my hand. What's wrong? Are you gay?
Yeah.
So I held his hand,
Right. Yeah. I mean, like you and I can sit here and joke. And I think that people just, I don't know. I got to tell you, like, I've done readings from my work before where people will just ask me the most outlandish questions, ask me questions like, first of all, and I think that writers who are, like people of color in general, we face this. Like everybody reads our novel and then they think it's about our lives. So they actually start asking questions about our lives. Right. So I'll be asked questions like, so when you ran away from home, no, that was my character.
Right.
Well, was that based on real life? No, I have this thing called an imagination and I utilize it to write these stories. It's fascinating. It's almost, and again, it's back to James Baldwin. It's like they want to compartmentalize you. They want to take you apart. They want to inspect you and analyze you. And you have to really just push back against that. Yeah. It's hard. Yeah.
Okay. So back to the weight of Palestine and the power, we'll get into the power of Palestine too, but back to the weight of it. Do you feel sometimes a responsibility? Okay. Sometimes you feel the responsibility of not messing up, but do you feel the other responsibility of feeling like you have to tell that story of struggle through your work? How much does that weigh on you?
It's part of who I am, but I have to make sure that I explain to people that I'm a Palestinian American. So I don't know the struggles of living in Palestine. I've been there many times. I spent a summer studying there, but there's no way that I can compare my life to the lives of Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank. So sometimes I get asked to come and speak on panels as a Palestinian voice. And so I give them a list of other Palestinians they can actually contact because I can't speak to that experience. So I think in that regard, I make sure that I am very clear that I'm writing about being Palestinian American, which has its own issues and challenges. And I uplift, I think, the idea of Palestine, the dream of return. I uplift all of these things. And obviously it's a deep part of who I am, but I have to differentiate and make sure that I'm not taking up space that Palestinian writers should be speaking, or I'm not taking up platforms that Palestinian writers should be speaking from. So that's another fine line I have to walk. It's difficult. It happens to me too as a person who's Christian and not Muslim. I get invited all the time to events to speak, at like a Muslim event or Muslim American Heritage Festival or something. And I have to say, I'm not Muslim, but here's my list of, really wonderful Muslim American authors. You should contact them. So sometimes it's more about making connections that need to be made and not taking space myself. Yeah.
I remember how old is Farah in her books?
She's 11.
I remember when I was 13, I was running for class president in my all-white school. And really, it was me. It was like 150 kids, and they were all white. And it was me and an Indian kid and an Asian kid and a half-black kid, and we were friends. And then other than that, it was all white. And I was running for class president, and my dad, who got very excited. He made like 500 photocopies of my face. We put it around the school. It was a very small school. And I came into class I put him up, and, I was a popular kid, and I put him up, and I came into school the day after America bombed Iraq in 1991, and somebody had written on my face, go home terrorist. And that was the first time that I always knew I was different before then, but I never knew that it had a, it was just like food and culture, and my dad spoke funny. And that's when it hit me that there was this political sort of element to me being different too, this political gravity. Is Farah, or has Farah, or will she be going through these kinds of sort of like, explicitly racial things as well? Or, I don't want to give anything, I don't got to give anything away, but I mean, is those kinds of experiences expressed in her journey as well?
Don't you remember we tracked down that kid and we beat him up the next day?
Come on, Selson, the FBI is watching for sure. Okay, I mean, I'm already tracked. Okay, please, Mr. FBI, this was a joke.
It was Brad, it was us. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, no, she will not experience those things because, and I'll tell you why. I'm also working on a young adult novel where my character will experience those types of things. But with Farah, again, I named her very deliberately. I want her to be a happy character. She has her best friends in school are Chinese American, Puerto Rican, Mexican, African American. So she's surrounded by diversity. She moves seamlessly between worlds. She has the childhood I wish every kid of color had. You know what I mean? There's no, and I think the reason I think that is because I think Arab American kids need to read a book where like there's an Arab kid in the book who's happy to be Arab, who thinks that speaking Arabic and speaking English is like some kind of a superpower, as opposed to like an awkward moment when your dad answers the phone when your friend calls or whatever. So I just wanted to create this world that was really a wonderful world, that was like an ideal world. And that's what I did. So she has problems with bullies. She has problems with her teacher. She has problems with all kinds of things. Her family's very poor, by the way. They're not the engineer, doctor immigrants. They're the immigrants who work minimum wage jobs and are really worried about, healthcare and stuff like that. And as a kid from a family like that, she's hyper aware of the family's money problems, because kids who are from those families, they know what's going on. Those things can't be hidden from them. So she has other problems that are not related to her Arab American background. And I did that deliberately as well.
What kind of reactions, we've talked, we can, I can sit here, and I do want to, brag about you for a second, because we can obviously sit here, and I encourage everybody. I'll put the link in a couple times. Susan Muaddi, Darraj, and I mean, all the awards: Ford Fellow, Arab American Book Award, Palestine Book Award, shortlisted, just a million different things. Okay, but most importantly, before we get to a couple questions, because we got a couple people logged in, what is the reaction you've been getting from kids, from the readers? What have they been telling you about how the kind of influence Farah is having on them?
Okay, there are 4 books that I've signed so far to girls named Farah, and I've had it's so nice. Like, and I've had the moms and the dads send me a picture of the girl holding up the book, and she's so because we were the kids who never found our names like on a keychain or whatever. So I think it's exciting for these girls to see their name on a book. Yeah, the reception has been terrific. Meeting the kids has been terrific. One of the things that I do when I go to schools, when I visit, before the pandemic, I would go physically and visit schools, and now it's virtual. But I say to the kids, like, Farah speaks Arabic at home and English at school. Do any of you hear a different language at home when you go home? And they're all excited to tell me. I speak Spanish. My mother speaks Russian. My grandfather speaks, Tagalog, and they all tell me these things. And it's like, now we're having a conversation about how it's a cool thing, right? So they connect to Farah in ways that, like, you don't have to be Arab American to connect to her experience. She's a daughter of immigrants, and we all have those commonalities. So I love meeting kids. Kids are very honest, they're very honest. I had a couple little girls tell me that they loved Farah's hair, because she has like this big hair. So Farah was actually drawn by an artist, an illustrator, Ruaida, who is she's Lebanese, who grew up in Colombia.
Oh wow!
she knows how to draw Farah's hair. So that was important to me, how Farah looked. Like I really was very picky about who would be the illustrator of the book because I wanted her to look really, really cool and really sweet and really, really neat. Like I was worried about a kid's book really depends on the illustrations. And I was so afraid somebody was going to really mess up how she looked, but they got her just right. And so a lot of girls have connected with her because they've said, "Oh, I love how her hair is and how her eyebrows are." And it's nice. I mean, I feel good knowing.
I do. I sometimes I do book readings. In fact, March is reading month, so I'm going to go to a few classes here in Dearborn where all the kids are Arab American. Next year we'll get you up here when we can actually be around people again. And what I ask them is after I'm done reading a book to them, I say, "Okay, guys, I know your parents are all Arab. I need you to tell me what a few things mean." And these are all like, third, fourth, fifth graders. And I say, "Okay, what does it mean when your mom does this?" What does it mean when your mom does this? That's right. This one right here. And then the worst one is what it means when your mom does this.
Yeah.
Right. Like not good.
The closed fist bite is also very
Any way they're biting themselves. And if they're biting themselves, this is not good. Okay, before we go to a couple questions, I have an online question from Selma Muaddi. She says, "Hey, Susan, are your writings translated into Arabic? I read The Inheritance of Exile in Arabic, but I don't know if there are other writings in Arabic."
Oh, Selma, thanks for the question. So my first book was translated into Arabic because it was there was a special program. The U.S. State Department picked my book to be part of it used to be called the Arabic Book Program. I think Trump got rid of that program, but part of that program meant taking a book published in America, translating it into Arabic. And I went on a book tour in Jordan when that happened a few years ago. So that's why that book is in Arabic. There is some talk about having my second book and also the Farah books be translated in other languages. I think Arabic is one of them, maybe French as well.
Okay, cool. All right, let me we have a couple people calling in. I'm going to bring them in. The first one is joining us. This is Christina. Hi, Christina. How are you?
Christina.
I'm good. Hi, Auntie Susan. Kifik.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good.
Oh, this is like a family reunion. Is this like a family reunion or something?
Oh, yeah. My friend. Hi, Habibti. How are you?
Hi, I'm so good. How are you?
Good. It's good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you too. Okay, so here's my question. So recently I gave a presentation at my school about the Palestinian perspective. And I go to a school with a lot of Zionists and Jewish kids, so I had to be really careful about what I said. So I got so many compliments on the presentation, but my history teacher, who really pushed for me to present this and was so on my side, told me I was too political in the sense that I sounded like a peacemaker rather than a Palestinian. So my question is, how has being Palestinian affected your work life and the way you've presented things? And how do you think you can help the younger generation build confidence in their voices and not be afraid to speak their truths about the struggles they face?
That's a good question. Amber, this girl is so smart.
Oh, I already know. Listen, I already know. I've done events with Christina already. She's a superstar leader in the Arab American teenage activist world. And we've had a few events together, and we're going to have a lot more events together. I already know how much of a superstar. I'm awesome. Scared. Okay. I hope like my career is over before she starts getting famous, because it's too much competition. I can't handle it. But go ahead, Selsen. I mean, and Christina, you said your teacher said you were being too political, as in you were being too diplomatic.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Go ahead, Selsen.
I think one thing is that when I was your age, we didn't have a lot of resources. The word Palestine was not even recognized as a country. You know what I mean? I remember growing up and kids would always have a little chain, showing the map of Italy or something to show where they were from. I couldn't even point to Palestine on a map. So actually today we have maps that say Palestine on them. And we talk about, there was a Palestinian Olympic team. And so when you order a map keychain, you can find Palestinian maps and you can find Palestinian symbols. So we didn't have that before. So I think in that sense, there's more like open reception of the idea of Palestine. But I think that the answer to your question is that we need a lot of resources. Like you need to be able to say to people who question you, you need to be able to say to them, hey, listen, go read this book and go watch this movie and go look at this documentary. So we need to have like, you know, resources available that you can share with people, because that gives you credibility as a person who is speaking for the Palestinian cause. So, you know, I think sometimes people, I feel lucky that people, you know, use like my second book, A Curious Land, is set in Palestine. And I remember doing years of research on that book to make sure I got the details right, because I knew that I would be questioned on the details. Like I knew people would say things like, oh, Palestinians were not there in 1932 or something like that. And I had to actually be able to show documentation that that is actually true. That's a fact. So having resources available that you can share with people is one tool. It just gives you credibility. You know, you're not basing your facts on things you've heard. You're basing them on published evidence and published materials. So hopefully that will help a little bit.
Good.
Thank you. What a great question.
Thanks, Christina.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Okay, another way of activism of getting your books around, Shu recommend that people suggest to libraries that they should add the Farah Rocks books to their collection. They've been successful there in central New Jersey, getting the books into Princeton and New Brunswick. So that's something people can do on a local level, is ask libraries to add it, and it'll get even more exposure. All right, Sausan, I have two more calls here that I think are going to be very important to you. The first one, I believe these are customers. The first one is from, well, they're both from here in Michigan. And the first one here is from Dayar and Mayar. Hi, guys.
Hi, guys. How are you?
Hello. Do you guys know how to talk? Hello.
They do. They're my buddies, too. How are you guys doing?
We just wanted to tell you that we love your books.
Oh, thank you. That's so special to me to hear you say that.
Have you guys read the books?
Not the third and fourth one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, the fourth one's you're good. The fourth one not even out yet, but you read the first and the second one?
Yes.
Good. Did you like them?
Yes.
And who do you think is more funny, Farah or Ammu Amr?
Yeah.
The truth.
Oh, okay.
Thank you guys for saying that. You know, writing is a very, when you're writing a book, you're working on it for a long time by yourself, and you're not, you know, nobody's looking at it. And so you wonder, is anyone going to like this when I'm done with it? So to know that you liked it, that makes me feel really good. So thank you for telling me that.
Okay, are you guys gonna make sure you read the next one too?
Yes.
Okay, and you're gonna tell everybody about it, and you're gonna take pictures with it?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right, guys, we love you. Good night.
Bye, we love you. Bye.
Bye. Go to sleep. Okay, bye-bye. Okay, thanks, Dayara Mayar. All right, I have one more group of customers here. These are Layla and Naifa from Michigan. Hi, Layla.
This is Nathan.
This is Nathan.
Oh, hi, Naifa. How are you?
Good.
Hi.
Good. Do you want to say something to Sausan?
I have a question.
Sure, go ahead.
Are there any other books that like will be coming out?
Yeah, there's one more coming out in the summertime. It's called Farah Rocks, Florida. And that's the fourth book in the series. It's not what you think, Amr. So Farah Rocks, Florida is, so Farah has to, she has to visit her grandmother, her Siti Feiruz, and Siti Feiruz lives in Florida. So Farah has to go to Florida and stay with her for a month. And the problem is Siti Feiruz is super strict. She's very strict. And so Farah has to get used to that. And Siti Fayduz only speaks in Arabic. So Farah has to really work on her Arabic. And they have some adventures down there in Florida together. So that was a fun book to write.
Amir, this is the second of Layla, by the way.
Yeah, I know. I thought she was Layla. I mean, when I saw her, she looked exactly like Layla. So Naifa, are you like Farah? Do you have some relatives who only speak Arabic, and sometimes you have to know Arabic so you know what they're saying, right?
Tell them her name, Farah, too.
Her name is Farah.
Who? Oh, your relative that only speaks Arabic. Her name is Farah.
Oh, that's funny.
My
Yeah.
Your cousin. So she speaks Arabic, and then you talk to her in English or Arabic.
I teach her English, but then I forget when we leave because we leave for a long time.
Okay. All right.
So that
How
you-
old are you?
I'm 7.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you look just like Layla. And how old is Layla now?
11.
Okay. And you guys are reading the book by Farah?
Tell them you took it to school and told them about it.
I took it to school.
Oh, really? And you told your friends about it?
Mhm.
Okay, good. Good.
Oh, thank you. I'm
So
glad-
Naifa, what are you gonna do when you grow up?
I want to write books.
Whoa.
Hey, that's good. Good. I'm glad you said that. You should write books.
So maybe you and Auntie Sausan, you can be best friends and she can teach you how to write books too. How about that?
Yep. That
Like-
sounds like a plan.
All right. Okay, Naifa, we love you. Good night.
Thank you, Amir. Thank you so
Okay.
much.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Thank you for calling me.
All right. Well, I mean, Sausan, it's working. Whatever you're doing, it's working. And I mean, if the kids are getting it, then I think it's working for sure. Because I mean, that's that kind of stuff. Look, I mean, we know it didn't exist for us. We had to navigate our identity without sort of. I mean, our parents were our mentors, but we didn't have artistic representations from Arab Americans that did that. So I mean, just thank you for everything you do. As a fellow Palestinian, thank you so much for everything you do.
And I feel like what like Christina was saying, I had a teacher, I tell this story a lot, it's real quick, but I had a teacher in college, a professor in college who taught the history of the Middle East course at my university. And I mentioned in class that I was a Palestinian American. And he actually said to me, and this was like 1995, he said to me, "Oh, that's not possible. There's no such thing as Palestinians." And he said, and I argued back with him because I had a big mouth. And he said, "You know, you're really Jordanian." He said it in this very authoritative way. This man with a PhD, you're really Jordanian, and being Palestinian, that's a made up identity. That's what he said. So I think, you know, that was 1995. It wasn't that long ago. So I think that the fact that the younger kids today are maybe, it's a little bit easier for them to talk about being Palestinian. I'm very grateful for that. And
Yeah.
if I can help in any way, that makes me feel really good.
No, we've moved forward, but unfortunately, they're still even facing those kinds of erasures, and so our work is not over. Our work has to continue. Well, Sausan, thanks again for joining us. We as Palestinians love you. We as NGP love you. We're very proud of you. Please, everybody, go out, buy all her books: The Inheritance of Exile, A Curious Land, Farah Rocks for your kids. Go to Susan Muaddi Darraj. I put it in the comments a bunch of times. Please go and support her. Let everybody know about her. Sausan, we love you. Thank you, and have a good night.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Ahmed. Have a good night.
Bye. All right. Well, once again, everybody, you watched another NGP Talks. Tonight, it was with author and activist Susan Muaddi Darraj. Please make sure, go support her. NGP, once again, is a network of Palestinian Americans where we bring each other together to support each other, empower each other. And if you want to join NGP, you've seen the link on the bottom. It's ngpalestine.org. It's for any Palestinian Americans to get together and really support each other and promote each other as much as we can. We'll have another NGP talk soon. Please join and follow the NGP Facebook page or my Facebook page. Please join all that stuff, and you'll see when we're having our next events, and hopefully we'll be out in the real world again sometime soon. Thanks, everybody.